Thank you very much. All right, ladies and gentlemen, it is 7:01. Mr. Clerk, it's Tuesday, October 3rd, and I'd like to call this General Committee meeting to order. I would first like to have a moment's silence for the mass shooting during the Country Western Festival in Las Vegas. Thank you very much. Committee, if I could have an approval of the agenda as amended. Councillor Perry, seconded. Mayor Daw. Comments, questions? Seeing none, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries, Mr. Clerk. Declarations of pecuniary interest and general nature thereof. Seeing none, Mr. Clerk. I'll move on. There are no presentations. Delegations. We have one delegation this evening. Craig Mather, President of the Aurora Cultural Center, and Suzanne Haynes, the Executive Director, and Stephanie Nicolo.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Deputy Mayor, members of Council. My name is Craig Mather, as already introduced, and I am the President of the Aurora Cultural Center. My role tonight is first to thank you for the opportunity to speak to you tonight and the opportunity for Center staff to explain this project in a little bit more detail. Secondly, to advise that the Board of Directors of the Center has approved the Canada 150 Milestone Mural Project and that we support your staff report, which is before you tonight. And on behalf of the Board of Directors, and there are several here tonight, I respectfully ask for your support as well. Thirdly, I want to thank Mr. Downey and his staff for their support of this project. And finally, I want to introduce Ms. Suzanne Haynes, our new Executive Director, who I know all of you have met over the last couple of months, who is going to run through the project in a little bit more detail. Thank you. Suzanne.
Thank you. Yes, so we have a presentation for you. We had a process by which we applied for a grant for this Canada 150 Milestone Murals. And we put out we actually received notification of funding late in the spring of this year. And we put out a call for a community arts facilitator. And we engaged Mr. Ted Hammer. We're going to try and move the slides through. There we go. So Ted comes with a lot of experience. He's a professional artist. He's a professional muralist. And he started to have a conversation with us about what this mural project might look like. And initially, the project was 4 murals, and we decided to bring it down into one art installation within which we could engage the community. We had a very clear process. The community engagement piece, we had over 900 people participate with us in the input process to help us determine what was going to be on the mural and on the art installation. And it was there were 4 themes that we were looking at under the Canada 150. Nature and the environment, who we are today and our bright future tomorrow, diversity and inclusion, and truth and reconciliation. And there were a number of themes that came out of the input that we got from the community, including the Aurora trails and arboretum, trumpeter swans, horse breeders, imagery from campers. We have a couple of examples here of what Ted has already completed in terms of the installation. The process then, of course, moved on to painting. So we took those themes and we wanted to determine what the images would look like, and then, of course, installing and revealing to the community. So what I love about this project was how engaging it was for the community. So there's a list here of all of the different places that we went out into the community just to have the conversation about what we were trying to build and connect with artists and organizations who would participate in some way. And we had a number of community organizations that we engaged with. This is a list of who have joined us in the project: the Museum and Archives, the Farmers Market Historical Society, the Public Library, the Aurora Studio Artists Group, Senior Center, the Society of York Region Artists, and Aurora's high schools. We have a number of high school student art council and visual arts classes that are also participating in the project. Next, we talk a little bit about the location of where this will go. This is a permanent installation, and it will be on the lawn on the south side of the building, in front of that light fixture. And what will it look like? So, we will be installing the posts that, in fact, look like branches, we hope, on the branches, we will have leaves. And that's what these are here that we've painted. And this is just an indication here of a Photoshop picture of what it might look like. So this is our project. We're pretty excited about the fact that it has been funded for the design and the creation of the art installation itself. And this presentation also supports a staff report that's coming up a little bit later in your agenda. So that is the end of the presentation, if you have any questions.
Thank you, Suzanne. And were there any further comments? You have 20 seconds. We will ask
I like
questions.
to be under time.
First, I'm going to receive it, and then I'll open it
fine.
up to questions. Thank you. May I have a motion to receive and refer the comments of the delegation? Councillor Tom, Councillor Thompson. Are there any questions or comments? Questions, please, to the delegation. Councillor Gardner.
Thank you for coming. Can you hold those up again? So when thank you. It's going to be great. So when the grant was, so they'll be painted on both sides. Excellent. So when the grant was applied for, it was just for the design. It didn't include anything about installation.
What the grant included was the ability to hire a community arts facilitator to design a piece, my apologies. I didn't want to stand behind the leaves. So the grant included the ability to hire the community arts facilitator to design and fabricate, and there wasn't anything in there in terms of installation. The initial grant included murals. It was a number of murals, and so we've moved to an art installation, which I think when I arrived at the center, I had a look at the project, and I was quite concerned about attaching anything to the Heritage Building, and so we decided to shift it into an art installation that was off the building. We've also spoken to Heritage Trust, and they have given us an approval for the installation off of the building as well, with the approval from Town Council.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Councillor Marakis?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to the delegate. This is more of a comment, but thank you for coming, Suzanne, and thank you for the whole board for coming. I appreciate it. I think this is a great showcase to show how the community has gotten involved together and worked together to develop, I think, a lasting legacy for the town, and what a great place to put it in front of the Church Street School Cultural Center. So I appreciate all the work you guys have done, and I'm looking forward to seeing it actually there. So thank you for coming tonight.
Anyone else for first time? Councillor Gardner?
I just wanted to thank the 5 members of the board who came tonight. And if you include Councillor Marakis and I, we've got 7 members of the board here. Pretty good showing. Yes, we could.
All right. I will call a vote then. All those in favor of receiving? Opposed? That carries. We will now go to the consent agenda. If there's anyone that would like to call any of the items for discussion, we can pull them and add them to our regular items. Councillor Thompson?
Thank you. I just had questions under C1. I didn't want to pull it to the regular agenda, but I did have some questions that I did want to ask.
Go right ahead.
Well, do you want to wait and see if anybody else has anything, or just?
Sure, I'll wait. Thank you, Councillor Gardner.
Thank you. I also have questions on C1, so perhaps we could put it on the regular agenda if both of us have questions.
Thank you. C1 will pull.
And
Councillor Gardner,
I'd also like C2 to be on the regular agenda.
pull that as well.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Seeing no one else, I will ask for a motion to approve the consent agenda as amended. C3, Councillor Thompson, Councillor Gardner. Comments, questions? Call a vote. All those in favor? That carries. All right, so we are going on to the regular agenda. Councillor Gardner? Councillor Gardner?
Actually, I don't mind.
All right, Councillor Thompson moves it. Mayor Dahl, you were going to move it too, so was Councillor Gardner, but that'll be seconded by Mayor Dahl. We're going to move R4 forward. All those in favor? Oppose? That carries. We will now do item R4. Would someone care to bring this forward? Oh, what have I got there? That's. Could I have someone move the motion? Mayor Dahl, Councillor Maracus will second. Comments, questions? I'll look at the board. Councillor Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My concern was that we were being asked for money when there was already a grant being given, but it makes perfect sense to me that it wouldn't be appropriate to put a mural on our historic building. So I thank the executive director for thinking of that and coming up with another plan, and I think that we should fund it.
Thank you, Councillor. I don't see any other comments or questions, so I'll call a vote. All those in favor? Oppose? That carries. Thank you very much for attending. You're welcome to stay. Doesn't get any more exciting than this, though. All right. You can leave at your leisure. We will go to R1 committee. We were going to put them at the end. Mr. Clerk, could you? We're at the discretion of council. No hurry. If we add it, okay, so we'll go through. We do. We'll start at R1, and we'll go to the two consent items that were pulled at the end. They'll be R8, R9. All right, so we are in R1, the engagement and review of the JOC project and costs. Would someone like to move this item? I'm looking left. Councillor Perry, Councillor Tom. Comments or questions? I'll look to the board. Mayor Dahl, would you start us off?
Excuse me. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Given that I was the one who suggested bringing this forward, I'm happy that it's on the floor, and I'm happy to approve it. There has been concern in terms of how the expenses came about and certain other issues, so I think this is an opportunity to have an outside pair of eyes look it over and come back and see if we went wrong, where we went wrong, and how we might improve in the future. So I think it's a good plan to move forward. Thank you.
Councillor Gardner?
Thank you. I agree with the mayor. It also is an opportunity for us to learn, if we've made mistakes, to learn from those mistakes. And so I will be in favor of this.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Thompson?
Thank you. You know, I had an opportunity to speak with our CAO about this. I just wanted to get a sense from him in terms of the value we're getting. I know that in the report itself, it talks about the two options, and one of the rationales for going with option one was budgetary reasons, and for me, I wanted a little bit more details on that, and through our conversations, I know the CAO felt strongly that the objectives that council were looking for in terms of a true costing of the project and identifying some of the issues that were presented previously, he felt would come out of that partial audit or limited scope audit, and so I was satisfied with that, and I'm okay with supporting the recommendation in front of us.
Thank you. Perhaps I'll ask Mr. CAO, Mr. Nadarosny, if there's a comment. Was that what you asked?
No, I was just, but if he wants to share his comments, that's up to him.
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, we just had a brief discussion about the difference between option 1 and 2, and my recollection of the conversation around this table at the time when staff were asked to go down this path was that you know, at the end of the day, you wanted to absolutely gain a sort of complete and final costing of the entire project from an impartial outside source, and that would include looking at the things that weren't done and how those will eventually impact the final cost of the JOC project. And I just relayed to Councillor Thompson that I felt the second option, which would have involved a lot more work with our with the suppliers that were involved and dragging them into the conversations, and it just seemed that the scope of work that council had been looking for was covered by option 1, and so I didn't see it necessarily as being a worthwhile investment to pay the significantly more funds for the second option.
Councillor Gardner, I'm going to go to councillors that have not spoken for the first time. Councillor Marakis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to our CAO. I don't, looking at it, I don't really have an issue with supporting going with the cheaper and the second alternative. But will that also include them looking at whether certain items whether they should have been excluded during the project to, in my view, to artificially lower the budget number, and then come back at a later date and say that we need them at that point? Will they be looking at those type of items as well?
Mr. CAO.
Through Mr. Chair, I'd submit that that'd be kind of tough for them for either of the, actually, to include that kind of an analysis, because what was happening at the time were judgment calls were being made of things to pull out of the project in order to meet the budget that was at the time. I do expect that it'll give you some light on that by looking at the things that weren't done and the decisions that were made to pull those out to get to the budget. But in terms of the value proposition of pulling this versus that, I think that wasn't, frankly, in the scope of either one of the options.
Okay,
Councillor?
thank you. But they will be looking at which items were like necessary, which items would be necessary, and for the ultimate works of the facility in itself. Would they not?
Mr. CAO.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'm not sure if I'm on the same wavelength, but they would be looking at the scope of the project as defined, and the tender documents and so on, and then the costing documents, and then comparing that to the actual costs that were incurred and the things that weren't done that were anticipated to be done. Again, I don't want to make it seem like they're going to go in and say, yeah, you made the right decision to not do this now and instead do, you know, something else in the project. So my sense is that they would analyze all the things that weren't done in order to meet budget and what the cost of those things being eventually needed will ultimately be. But I think it might be tough for an outside external consultant to make a value decision on individual components that were delayed or advanced. Certainly that wasn't within the scope of either one of the two options that we had. I mean, it's something you could ask them to do, but I think that would be much more intensive work.
Councillor.
That's it for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson, you spoke already? Okay. Anyone else for a first time? I'll just say I'm in favor of moving forward with this. We are about to move into the hydro funding and the library square and other items. So anything we can learn by the process, as the mayor had said, would be valuable moving forward. I think Councillor Gardner expressed the same. I'll go around a second time. Councillor Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Actually, when I'm looking at what council passed, we were looking for a comprehensive list of lessons learned respecting 2 projects. And I think the limited scope is not going to do that.
Why don't we do that?
So we have on the table, the motion is talking about the limited scope. I'm not in favor of that. I'm in favor of going with the full audit cost. I mean, if we're going to do this, we may as well really learn from it.
I was just going to comment that perhaps Mr. CAO could, maybe there's an opportunity to look at what the audit says, and then we can make our comments and where we went wrong and what we could do right. Mr. CAO.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. If you add the items in option 2, that really doesn't get you to the lessons learned piece. My interpretation of it was that was a separate list coming at the same time from staff about the lessons learned in the process. So you'd have an accurate costing, but you'd also have a list of things from a staff perspective that we would do differently if presented with the same project and the same, and most importantly, the same constraints on budget.
Councillor?
Thank you. You're quite right that the motion does say that. So with respect to, through you, Mr. Chair, to Mr. Niederosny, then with respect to the 2 options, there's quite a difference in cost, 29 versus 72.5. So what extra would we be able to know by having the more expensive audit?
Mr. CAO?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the work involved in option 2 would basically take you back to the very first decisions and the basis of the budget, and then the next costing and where they're, and sort of verify each step of the process. I just don't know that there's a lot of value in that, given that we didn't complete the project as originally envisioned anyway, as we've seen now and you'll see in the capital budget where the other items are in there. So, you'd be talking to the project management people, you'd be talking to the architects, you'd be, just basically drilling back to first principles and doing sort of a full comprehensive audit, which is absolutely something that can be done, and that's why we've quoted as an option. When we looked at the cost difference for that, we just weren't sure that that's really what council wanted to glean from this exercise. But if council wants to do that sort of full comprehensive review from start to finish of the project, then there's a price there to do that.
Councillor?
Thank you. And my opinion is that we started to go wrong with the purchase of this land, and perhaps not the purchase of this land, but we didn't take into account all of the problems that this particular piece of land would have, and then figure that into the costing from the very beginning. And I think that's a really important piece of the puzzle, and important for us to learn going forward. We need to know everything that we need to know before we purchase a piece of land, or before we start to work on a piece of land that we own. And that piece was missing.
All right,
And
thank you.
so that's why I'm in favor of the more comprehensive audit.
Well, let's go around and see where we are. Councillor, if that's fair, I'll move on. Councillor Thompson, Councillor Maracas, Mayor Dahl.
Thank you. Perhaps Mr. Nazarowski, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but on page 6, it lists option 2 and sort of the expectations. It does indicate that a report will include the findings and actionable recommendations for process improvements. I guess, it may or may not go as far as some on council are looking for, but I think to me that kind of indicates that it will identify, process improvements going forward, as you've correctly stated, Councillor Abel, that we have a number of, large projects on the horizon, from the fire hall to potential of a new recreational center and library square and so forth. So I think that will help us learn some lessons in that perspective. But I also think that, to Councillor Maracas's point, I think what I'm looking for is a true project cost. I want to know not just what we spent, but perhaps what still needs to be spent to complete the project for 100%. We've already seen in our capital budget some items that, we'll have a discussion, perhaps should have been included when we were originally doing the project. And so for me, when I look at the analysis of the scope reductions and subsequent costs to complete the project bullet point, to me, that tells me that when this report comes back, I'm going to get a complete and full accounting of the project, not just what's been spent, but what still needs to be spent. So I have a true indication of what the total cost of the project will be, and I think that's what we were looking for initially. And so I'm satisfied that the report and the bullets mentioned in option 2 will address the concerns that I personally have raised, but I'll listen to what other members of council have to say.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Marakis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I agree, and that's when I read that too, and that's why my thoughts were that I was hoping that that's what we would be getting, and from what I'm reading is that in essence that's what we will be getting. So I'm fine with that. But I think that the bigger question and the piece that might be missing in all of this is that lessons learned part aspect of it as far as the management of the project, and this doesn't speak to that, and I know that it doesn't. And this is great, and we're going to get an audit of it, and we're going to see the true costs of it, and we need to do that, of course, 100%. We've been pushing for that and asking for that all the time, the whole time. But that management piece of the project and how things got us to this point is just as important. And I think we're going to need to get that part of it as well, so that way we can learn how to look at the future projects that we're going to be dealing with, because I think that's just as important as what we're going to be getting from this audit.
Thank you, Councillor Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And through you, if I may, to Mr. CAO, we've had many discussions about bringing forward lessons learned. Is this on the work list? It's not necessarily part of the audit, and I'm not sure how it could be part of the audit, but it would be more of a staff function. Are you already prepared that that's going to come forward with this report, with the audit report?
Mr. CAO.
To you, Mr. Chair, I anticipate that we would take the auditors' findings and make sure that we included the things that they found in terms of their work to our work to bring forward a list of lessons learned at the same time as the audit is produced.
Thank you. And Councillor Gardner raises a very valid point with respect to the land, but we have discussed that on more than one occasion. I mean, the opportunity to do something about that was back then. So I think we have had that discussion. It doesn't hurt, and we've had reports on that. So it doesn't hurt once all this is coming back to us to have a full package of information for council to go through, so that we can all satisfy ourselves that we've left, what's the phrase? We've left no stone unturned. Thank you.
So we have the total fee of $29,000. And Mr. Clerk, there's been a lot of talk about option 2. So if this were defeated, then we could then entertain option 2. Is that satisfactory, committee? This is option 2? I'm looking at the one at 29,000. Okay, thank you. All right. Option 1 was the full. Okay, so now that I'm clear, I'll call a vote. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries, Mr. Clerk. We will now go to item 2, capital project status and closures. It's prepared by our financial department. Could I have a motion to put this on the floor? Mayor Daw, seconded. All right, we have no seconder. Councillor Thompson. Any comments, questions? Mayor Daw, you can start.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I had a conversation with the CAO about this already. Most of this is fairly straightforward, but when I see things, as an example, on the first page of attachment 1, so page 5 of 15, under fleet management, the first item is a Ford F-150 that was originally approved at $45,000. It was purchased for approximately $30,000, so approximately $15,000 is going back to the reserves. That's roughly 1/3 of the price. To me, that's a huge variance. I'm not necessarily looking for an answer tonight, But what I would like to see, and this is the conversation I had with the CAO, was, so the description here is project is complete and can be closed, return 15,000 and change to the source. I don't think that's descriptive enough. I'd like to know a bit more detail why the difference, and I would suggest, just generally speaking, if we have a difference of more than 10 or 15 or whatever that number is, 20% of budgeted to actual, that there should be a little more detail in behind that. And I would leave that simply with the CAO for him to be able to find a relatively simple way to incorporate that in the reports. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. Councillor Thompson?
I agree completely. I've said it on numerous occasions, you know, especially with regards to this type of reporting. So, for example, 1.07 talks about the bulk water meter installation, and you got the full price, the $580,000 returned to source, because it just says project canceled. And for the life of me, I can't remember why we canceled that project. And so perhaps there can be a reference to a report that spoke to it, or some additional information just to give me some background on why did we cancel the bulk water meter installation. I think I know, but I'm not certain. And so I think it is helpful to have those kind of questions. Same thing with certain things like the Willow Farm Trail improvements and some of the others. These were in big projects that it just says grant funding not approved. I'm wondering, is it possible to get a little bit more details on perhaps why our grant application wasn't approved, if we know anything? Sometimes we don't. They just say, thanks, but you weren't unsuccessful. But, you know, if there's a particular reason why we weren't successful in it, I think it's good to know. I know that we try for a lot of different grants, for a lot of different projects, and it seems like we don't have a great track record, and I'd like to get a better handle on why we haven't been successful. And so, again, you know, I would appreciate some more detail when it comes to why some of these projects, you know, either the full amounts aren't being spent or being returned to source or so forth. Because I think, you know, in this case, the more information, the better.
Next week. Thank you, Councillor. I'm just checking with the Mr. CAO, and I'll just ask him to comment because we're all saying relatively the same thing.
Through you, Mr. Chair, so the mayor had raised this issue with me, and given the shortness of time, I did bring it back to the ELT, and I believe that most of the team members here are prepared to answer individual questions, which I'd ask them to do for tonight, and I ask that future reports be more explicit in those comments. But if council wants something more explicit done, we can certainly do that as well.
Councillor Thompson?
Thank you. Then I guess perhaps this is best directed to Mr. Downey then. Could you refresh my memory? Why was the bulk water meter project canceled?
I think Mr. Elliott was handling that.
Yes, I'm just throwing.
Okay, I'm sorry, you're right. I mean, it would be fair if he had the opportunity to have a look for it, but
I'd have just followed up. The CAO's comments was he said that staff were prepared to answer any questions, so I threw a question.
Yes, I did.
Was it the one question they didn't know?
For those 2 weeks, perhaps I was. Through you, Mr. Chair, I believe this was a planned pre-purchase of a whole bunch of stock, and it was decided not to advance that way, that they were already behind. But I'm going by memory here, and I can confirm that with an email tomorrow.
That's fine.
anyone else? Councillor Gardner?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, to Mr. Downey. Sorry, Mr. Downey. So we have 1.23 is a tennis court resurface. $75,000 was the approved, and the expenditure was just under 26. So again, and it was like this last year too. I spoke to the CEO as well. It would seem to me that this would be a relatively straightforward thing to estimate. So did we, why is there such a variance, please?
Mr. Downey?
Through you, Mr. Chair, with regards to tennis courts, what we normally do is we budget based on the worst case scenario. Without having an opportunity to do any testing or have a contractor go out and give us an estimate because we haven't done a project, we know what it costs to resurface tennis courts. Once we have the contract in place, we can then go out and then evaluate the work that needs to be done, and the contract is actually itemized, or the work that needs to be done. And if, when getting into this work, we find that it's not quite as bad as it was, then we simply don't do the work. So we budget based on the worst case scenario and hope for something less. Conversely, we could look at an evaluation, give us the lowest possible estimate, but then we wouldn't want to come back and revisit. So much easier to return money to a source and not ask for additional funding, but make sure we have sufficient funding to do the work we need to do once we have the contractor there.
And thank you, through Mr. Chair. That absolutely makes sense to me, but this is, I mean, it cost a third of the estimate. It seems to me that that's a pretty big variance, but I'm sure this is not an easy job.
One of the issues with a tennis court is quite often the surface starts to undulate. So we're not quite sure what causes that. It could be a drainage issue, or it could simply be we have settlement happening within the base. If it's settlement within the base, it's a fairly easy fix. If we have to then tear it up in order to, or put additional drainage system in, as you can appreciate, that's a much more expensive proposition. So when we get into those, we're not quite sure until we actually get in and find out, once we expose that base, do we have standing water? Is that the issue, or is it simply the fact that we have some settlement happening within the base? And that's one of the reasons that we're running into a situation where we're at budgeting for the worst case, because we don't know, and then when we get in there, we find out it's not quite as bad as we thought it was.
Thank you. And I just wanted to know, this is of the 31st of July, so a lot of money hasn't been spent. Does anybody have an idea of how much we are going to be able to spend of this? Because we sometimes have projects that carry over from year to year to year sometimes.
With regards to the projects you're looking at right now, these are all closed. So these are completed projects.
As it says on the top of the...
Right. There
As
are
it
no
says on the
additional...
top of the report.
There are no additional expenditures for these projects.
Thank you, and I'm thinking of the C report. Thank you very much.
All right, if there's no other questions, if there are others and you look through it, I'm sure if you email Mr. Nadarosny, he'll be able to get those answers for an email prior to the next council meeting. Because I see myself, there's one, and I'll ask it, but we should be asking these questions. All right, all those in favor? Opposed? I'm going to call that that motion passed. The hands aren't moving very high. All right, we'll go to R3, and this is another in the financial services. Fees and charges update. I'll look to my left. Is there someone that will move? Second? Not much action there. Oh, one. Moved by Councillor Tom, thank you. Seconded, Councillor Gardner. I'll look to the board for any questions. Comments? I'll start with Councillor Thompson.
Thank you. Just later on, we're going to deal with R6, which talks about Bill 148 and the implications to the corporation in terms of minimum wage increases and that potential impact. So my question really is through you to Mr. Downey. Mr. Downey, I guess arguably you probably have the most employees that perhaps would be affected by this increase in minimum wage. Was there any thought in raising the fees or charges to help offset some of the wage costs associated with programs and services in your area?
Mr. Downey?
Through you, Mr. Chair, with regards to the pricing structure for the department, actually we were just recently audited by the region with regards to that exact process, and they are recommending that we go back and revisit some of our pricing using a number of metrics, whether those be the cost of running the program, subsidy levels for that the council would like to impose on the program, market conditions, those types of things. We have not done that review. It is, as you know, one of the things that was on my agenda for the Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee. So it is something I would like to see us get done during this term, and is certainly something that the regional auditor has identified as something that is needed within the department. So to answer your question specifically, no, we haven't adjusted any of our rates in response to any actions that the province may take with regards to the minimum wage. However, we do believe that there will be an impact from our pricing structure once that is imposed, and that is something that we definitely need to introduce into our new pricing structure. The pricing structure you see before you right now identifies an across-the-board increase as requested through our Financial Services Department, and we have also added some additional programming in response to some of our user needs. We do or will need to impose the new rates that are going to be imposed by the province at some point.
Thank you, Mr. Downey. And I guess just for the rest of council, I know that we had a recent conversation at the Finance Advisory Committee with regards to the potential impact as we head into the budget, and I know staff are working on presenting some strategies to blunt that impact, but I think it's just something for all of us to consider as we move into budget next year with all of the pressures there, that there might have to be some sharing of those costs to user fees.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Gardner?
Thank you. I'm really sorry to see that Section 10, the youth after-school membership fee, is being removed. I'm guessing that there wasn't any uptake in this, or not much uptake in this, through you, Mr. Chair, to Mr. Downey.
Mr. Downey, please.
Through you, that's correct. We're just not getting much uptake. Now, this is a program that Activate Aurora is very, very interested in partnering with the school board and ourselves on. So we're hoping that even though it disappears from our program, it is a program that we might be able to partner with the school board on.
Thank you. This was one of the recommendations of the Youth Advisory Committee from about the year 2000. Trying to get kids active, or slightly older kids active. Can you explain Section 9 about the Senior Center special events vendors?
Mr. Downey?
Certainly. This is in response to an increased number of programs and activities happening at the Senior Center that we hadn't envisioned in
Right.
the past. So we're finding now that we have to start changing our business practices in order to start addressing some of these. And the seniors are now bringing in vendors, and we haven't got a fee structure in order to deal with that. So so this is a good news story, actually, that we are looking at expanding programs, and our pricing bylaw is now responding to those needs.
Can you give me an example of a vendor?
Certainly, we may have a craft sale at the senior centers. You know, there are crafts that are being sold at the senior center, but then there's an opportunity also for outside vendors to come in and do that. So the seniors are looking at expanding their programs, and we wanted to make sure that we were able to address that need and also address it within the pricing structure, in that we couldn't charge a vending fee if it wasn't actually in the bylaw.
Thank you. Good idea.
Thank you, Councillor. If there are no further questions or comments, I'll call a vote. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. We'll move on to R5. We did R4. This is from our Planning and Building Services. I'll look to my right for someone to move this. Councillor Gardner, seconded. Mayor Daw, you moved. I'll look to the board for any comments or questions. All right, I'm going to call a vote then. All those in favor? All right.
Did you beat me to it?
I've got Councillor Marakis and then Councillor Gardner. Councillor Gardner. I'll go with Councillor Gardner.
I don't see, maybe I missed it. has this been in the works for a while, through you to Mr. Muno?
Mr. Ramuno?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Yes, it has. This is the Shimvest Development Company. It's the last parcel that they own. So they have been in discussions with me for, I guess, over a year now on this parcel.
Thank you.
Councillor? Councillor Marakis?
I was just going to say yes.
Okay. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. R6 from our corporate services. This is an interesting one. I think, Mr. Mayor, you held a Save That Date special thing with the Chamber. And I know it's been discussed at the Finance Committee. I will look to my left for someone to move. Councillor Tom, seconded. Councillor Perry. Comments, questions? I'll look to the board. All right. Mayor Dahm, Councillor Gardner.
Well, I'm not really sure what to say. The government seems quite intent on this legislation going through, despite probably every small business, large business, and municipality I've talked to who is against it. The ramifications are huge, and as you can see, us is going to be a substantial pressure on our budget this year. It's Mr. Elliott close to 1.5% on as a regular tax increase. That's before we do anything else. So, you know, the ramifications are huge. And it's not just wages, although that's a big thing for us. It's some of the call-outs and some of the other provisions. So I know that at AMO, the provincial government did indicate that they may be relooking at it, but I don't hold out a lot of hope.
I do believe, Mayor Dahl, that's taking effect this January, so there's not a lot of... Hasn't passed yet, okay. Councillor Gardner, then Councillor Thompson.
Well, it's not good news. I'm looking at on page 1, the last bullet point. I'm not sure that I understand that. The town will ensure independent contractors are used appropriately by the organization. And then it says on page 4, and make any appropriate adjustments to their status as required. I'm really not sure what that means.
I would ask Mr. Elliott, do you have a moment to look at that?
Or if not, for next week.
I'll let Mr. CAO take a stab at it.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I believe that. Through you, Mr. Chair, I believe that reference is because we will also see probably some resulting contractor increases as well, and so we may have to adjust our deployment of contractors when we see the implications to that sector. So that's across the board, everything from some of our program deliveries on the recreation side right through to contractors that we use that would be at the lower end of the scale. So it's just a reference to the fact that there could be other implications beyond our actual payroll.
Councillor?
Thank you, Mr. CEO. I was looking at that word used appropriately. Yeah,
Mr. Elliott, do you want to? That's correct, but she's looking, and I did look at her, so I've got fingers going across the board.
Well, don't fight over it.
Tasha, Ms. Van Leeuwen, please.
If you could repeat the question, that would be helpful for me. Thank you.
So I'm looking at page 1, the last bullet point. The town will ensure independent contractors are used appropriately by the organization.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So I know that, for example, in our Parks and Recreation Department, we do use contractors to facilitate many of our programs. And so that's the context of contractor in this regard. So if we have a fitness instructor who we have a contract with and is providing that service on behalf of the town, that's what this is with respect to.
So are they being used inappropriately? I don't understand. No. Okay. I'll ask you later.
Mr. CAO would like to comment on that part.
Through you, Mr. Chair. This is one of the sectors that the provincial government is trying to sort of correct what in their view is an injustice, that organizations will sometimes use outside contractors to get around provisions of usually it's a unionized environment where there would be minimum call-outs and things, and so those organizations turn to contracting out as a way to get around some of those things. So the province has stated in its broad objectives of where it's going with these proposed changes that that's one of the vulnerable employee sectors they call them, I think, that they're trying to bring some balance to. So the reference is that we will make sure that we're using contractors appropriately and not using them to get around our collective bargaining agreement or those types of things that the province is trying to eliminate.
Councillor?
And when we, during budget, we often talk about hiring contract employees as opposed to making them, in quotes, staff, because that enables us not to give them benefits. Is that also part of this package?
Mr. Nadarosny?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I don't know if specifically that type of, I mean, generally, yes, that's what they're trying to avoid is getting employees and skirting around some of the other obligations that you would otherwise have for your workforce. But in my understanding of what they're ultimately doing, it wouldn't be to stop allowing municipalities to have contract employees. I mean, we don't, for example, if we bring in a contract employee, they're generally paid at the same rate as the employee if they were full-time. Okay. When we're filling, usually a contract employee for us is a temporary nature, or we're looking to fill something for a temporary time period, or it's a temporary job. So yes, broadly, that's what they're trying to avoid, but there will still be provisions to use contracted employees for municipalities.
Thank you, and I raise it specifically because we once had a contract employee for 3 years.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson?
Thank you. I know that AMO, the Association of Municipalities of Ontario, is sort of advocating on municipalities' behalf and raising the concerns that were expressed at the recent conference with the Liberal government and this bill specifically. But I wonder now that, staff have had a chance to sort of identify what the potential impact and cost is to the town, whether or not the mayor has had a chance to speak with our MPP, Chris Ballard, and share those concerns, both the financials as well as some of the other direct impacts as a result of this legislation. So perhaps with your permission, just maybe perhaps the mayor can speak to whether or not that information has been passed along to our MPP.
We're kind of putting them on the spot, but go right ahead, Mayor Dom.
It's okay, that's why they pay me the big bucks. I haven't spoken with our MPP directly about this issue. We did pass along the information, and he was invited to the session we had here last week. I just haven't had an opportunity to catch up with him directly yet, but we do have regular meetings, and I will definitely be bringing it up.
Thank you, Mayor Dom.
Thank you. I just think it's important to share that information.
Thank you, Councillor. Okay, if there's no further comments or questions, I'm going to call a vote. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries, Mr. Clerk. That's R6. Now, R7 was added on, and I'm going to ask our clerk to comment on this. Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, should apologize to committee for the short time frame and rather unusual circumstances this correspondence is coming before you tonight. But we are on a bit of a tight timeline with the Toronto Region Conservation Authority wanting the town to nominate a member or a person to sit on the Regional Watershed Alliance. The reason for the short notice is that the Environmental Advisory Committee does meet this coming Thursday, and one of the suggested options from the Toronto Region and Conservation Authority is that the Environmental Advisory Committee assign a person to. So that's the reason for the short notice, and we are looking for direction from Council tonight to nominate someone. Thank you.
Committee.
Excuse me, committee.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. So the notice is, do we have some options, Mr. Clerk? Could we wait until the Environmental Committee waits or meets on Thursday and then bring it to Council, or?
through you, Mr. Chair. Yes, the suggested options from TRCA were a member of council, a member of the Environmental Advisory Committee, or a senior staff member. Now, if council would refer this matter to the Environmental Committee for Thursday, we could certainly report back next Tuesday about their suggested pick.
All right, so we'll open it up. I just wanted to sort of get that out. Thank you. So there are three options, and first speaker on the board is, oh, do we have to put a motion forward? Okay, so before we go forward, we're going to have to put a motion on the table. So would we refer this to Economic Advisory Committee for Thursday? Environmental, excuse me. There is no economic. How can we can't really give direction. Could we just receive at this time?
Sure, with the understanding that staff brings it to the Environmental Committee for their comments.
Okay, so it's been suggested, one, we could receive this with the understanding that staff will bring this to the Environmental Advisory Committee on Thursday. Moved by Councillor Thompson, seconded by Councillor Gardner. All right, so those comments are still valid. I mean, if that's the motion now we have, I'm going to start with Councillor Thompson.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions, and I'm not sure who best can answer it, but on the cover letter, it talks about the fact that they're extremely grateful for the support and participation of the Town of Aurora Council representatives on the Don, Humber, and Etobicoke-Mimico watershed committees in the past. And I wonder who served on those committees.
It wasn't me. So,
And I don't remember anybody during our
No, and
two terms, so I don't know if any staff members was there staff members? Was anybody ever on these watershed committees, or is this just perhaps some mistakes made by TRCA?
so I think
I see blank looks, so I will assume that that's not the case. Yes.
might be a
And then again, if I can put Mayor Dawn on the spot, just in regards to this Regional Watershed Alliance, and how does that coincide with Lake Simcoe's?
Mayor Dahl. Would you help us out on that?
I'll try. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you to Councillor Thompson. The TRCA, I don't know what the percentage of land is, maybe Mr. Ramuno knows that, but in the extreme southeast corner of Aurora is TRCA. So what, less than 1% probably of Aurora is TRCA, and the rest is LSRCA. This is the TRCA working with their various partners on their sub-watershed plans. The Lake Simcoe Regional Conservation Authority has already done all its watershed plans. We did this in a different way. So this is the TRCA looking for local input in terms of developing those sub-watershed plans. I would think that the participation from a member from Aurora, be it a councillor, a committee member, or a staff member, would not be very onerous, although I don't know that for a fact, but my suspicion is that we wouldn't have a very great part to play because we have such a small area that is TRCA. I hope that helps.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And as I understand, there are three rivers or watersheds. One is the Rouge and the Humber. That's all part of TRC. Very good. I'm sorry, Councilor Marakis, you're next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to, I'm not sure who would answer this as well, but where would the meetings be located? Does anyone know? Just maybe that might be something useful for EAC on Thursday for them to know, where they might have to travel if appointed.
If we get confirmation on that, we'll ask staff. I'm seeing Mr.
Thank you.
Mr. Clerk is writing that down. I'll leave that with you, Michael. All right, if that's it, Councillor, I will go to Councillor Gardner.
Thank you. I think in all the time I've been on council, I've only heard maybe one or two residents talk knowledgeably about watersheds. I mean, it is complicated, and I would say anybody who sat on the committee would have to have a fair amount of knowledge. So, I mean, we could pass it on to the committee. Would we have a chance to maybe advertise this? Do we have time to advertise it? No, we don't have time to advertise this. Or maybe somebody could sit in the interim, but I mean, we really should get somebody who there are some people who live and breathe watersheds because it is really very, very important. Not supposed to transfer water between watersheds, but keep everything in your own. So it's, maybe we could see what EAC says, but perhaps investigate it further. But at the end of the day, it's such a small percentage of our watershed, and our watershed has already been taken care of, as the mayor said. So I'm not sure how important this is to us unless we find somebody really who knows what they're doing and really wants to sit on it.
Thank you. Any further questions, comments? Seeing none, I'm going to call a vote. All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. We'll see what EAC brings out of that. We have 2 items pulled from the consent agenda. We'll start with C1. This is to be received. Will someone put this on the floor? Councillor Gardner seconded. Councillor Thompson. I'm looking on the board. I see Councillor Thompson. C1.
Thank you. Just so everybody can follow along, on page 2, one of the paragraphs talks about the fact that Aurora collected 21.44 million of development charges during 2016. And given the recent news story with regards to York Region and the fact that they were choosing to delay or cancel some projects because development charges weren't where they expected them to be, I just wanted to get a sense from Mr. Elliott whether or not that 21.44 million was on pace or in line with our expectations.
Mr. Elliott.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'm pleased to report that actually it exceeded our expectations. Our 2016 10-year capital plan included on the very last page of that plan, our expectation for 2016 DC collections was about 19.4 million, and so we exceeded that by $2 million. The region has been suffering slower than expected growth across the region, but not from Aurora. And so we're on pace with our expectations and fulfilling the region's expectations, but in general, their growth is slower than they had initially anticipated, and this is why they're in the situation they're in.
Thanks, Mr. Elliott. It's good to hear that we're ahead of expectations. My second question really has to do with the schedule itself and the fact that we've identified municipal parking as something we're collecting DC charges for. Can you sort of put some context around what the expectation is in terms of us using those funds?
Mr. Elliott.
Through you, Mr. Chair, the DC background study, our consultant was charged with looking at all services that we offer that are subject and eligible for DC collection, and municipal parking is a service that we can identify separately and identify a service level that is there for the existing community, and then we extend that forward into growth and how many additional parking spaces we would need to accommodate the expected growth. And so the DC consultant was able to do that. And so there's a general provision in our DC bylaw for the acquisition of additional municipal parking spaces. That's acquisition, that's development of, it's acquisition through purchase, through construction, however we choose to do it. It's a general provision for expenditure of this nature.
Thank you. Those were my only questions. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you to Dan, to Mr. Elliott. Sorry, I didn't get a chance to speak to you on this, so I'm not intending to broadside you, but we had a conversation a while ago about the new fire station. And in that report, we were talking about how many years it would take us to pay for that, and it was based only on residential DCs. Is there a report going to be coming back to us that speaks about non-residential DCs and how they're going to contribute, in this case, to fire?
Mr. Elliott.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I wasn't anticipating bringing back a separate report just on the non-res DCs. The non-res DCs are a little bit more difficult to forecast their frequency. We know that they're going to happen, but sometimes they come in bits and bunches in different years. And so it's difficult to forecast. We focus primarily on the residential growth. That's the major contributor of our DCs. But certainly the non-res DCs that do occur will be funding the fire hall as they come in.
Thank you. Follow up. We have a certain amount of industrial business park land. Like it's a finite amount. Wouldn't we be able to comment on or know how much money in DCs that would bring in? Through you.
Sure.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Certainly that information is contained in our DC background study, which was conducted back in 2014. We're going to be updating that study in the early part of 2019. And so at that point in time, we'll have a better sense on that. Our non-residential lands are much more defined. They're also beginning to have applications against them, subdivision applications or site plans. Much of that is starting to happen. Forecasting exactly when they will be paying those, in which years, continues to still be a little bit elusive. But by the beginning of 2019, we might be in a better position to take a look at that.
Councillor?
Thank you. On page 2, under analysis, third line, the amount includes $7 million of DC funds committed to capital projects, but which were unspent at the end of the year. So is there, I'm sure there's many reasons why they weren't spent, but is that normal? That's a lot of money. Through you, Mr. Chair, to Mr.
Highlight, if possible.
Through you, Mr. Chair, absolutely. Earlier in the agenda, we had a report on the status of open capital. The attachment number 3 listed a lot of capital projects that were approved, fully funded, but not yet spent and not yet completed. And they're in various stages of process. At the end of each year, if the DC funding has not been spent, it needs to get put back into the DC reserve for reporting purposes. It's an accounting adjustment only. And then those funds continue to be available for the capital project in the following year. And so that was what the reference to the $7 million was. It's noted on attachment number 1 in part 1, the second line from the bottom. It's the unspent committed allocations to capital.
Thank you. I follow up. I was just wondering, and maybe it's here and I didn't see it, how much are we hoping to spend that whole amount by the end of the year?
Yes.
Thank you. And this is something which I've had trouble with for quite a while, and it seems that some of the residents do. It's in the same paragraph. It says, part 2 of this noted statement details how DC Reserve Fund monies were spent for both operational and capital needs. My understanding is that DC funds are meant only for capital projects. Through you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Elliott?
Certainly, DC funds are primarily for the construction of infrastructure, hard capital assets. Part of those projects, though, includes design work, project management work, and inspection work. And so there's a number of departments that draw from their DCs to fund those aspects of staff time on these projects. That's one allocation. The other one is included in the DCs are certain studies like the official plan, comprehensive zoning bylaw, growth studies, trails master plans, these kinds of things. These are eligible for DC charges because they're long-range planning to accommodate growth. And so they are eligible for DC funding, and so we use those as well in the operating side to fund these studies.
Councillor?
Thank you, Mr. Elliott.
Thank you, Mr. Elliott. Councillor Thompson, second time. Anyone else want to comment? Go Go ahead, Councillor.
Thank you. I just wanted to draw attention to that part too, because it does identify the specific things that were transferred for the operating budget. For example, the SARC debenture payment. So when the decision was made to build the SARC and fund it, it was funded, and then they were using the debenture, which would eventually be paid by DCs. So that comes out of the operating budget. There is a line item for that in our operating budget. So, I mean, we see it every year. And so for those that are trying to follow along, it is provided in Schedule 2, the specific items that the DCs were used that are in our operating budget.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you. It's good. We learned something here. No further comments, questions. I'm going to call a vote. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries, Mr. Clerk. Chair would just like a moment to recognize and welcome back to the chamber former Councillor Al Wilson. Welcome back. We'll go on to C2. Was that the second one we pulled, C2? Yep. Okay, this is to be received for information. Could I have someone put this on the table? Councilor Gardner, you will move this? I'm just asking for a motion to get this on. Thank you, Councilor Gardner, seconded by Councilor Thompson. Councilor Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think I'm going to wait till next week because there would be, in light of what Mr. Elliott has said, I have a couple of questions that
Yes.
might be able to be answered.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right, then, I'm going to call a vote. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries, Mr. Clerk. Does that conclude our agenda? Very good. That concludes our agenda tonight, and we are on new business. I'm going to start to my left, and first of all, I'd like to congratulate Councillor Perry and welcome him back to committee, and congratulations on your marriage. And would you have anything for new business?
I don't know.
Thank you very much. Councillor Tom?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's October, and I'm noticing that the last time I checked, the lav was not installed at the Memorial Park. I just want to know what the status of that
The
project
LAV,
is.
LAV, Light Armored Vehicle. Mr. Downey, please.
Mr. Chair, we have scheduled for installation of the LAV at the War Memorial prior to Remembrance Day. We've got everything in place. It was my recommendation, actually, we don't install it till after Halloween. So that we would then have an opportunity for those in that 11 days to bring it in. And so they hopefully are going to start the very next day.
Thank you, Mr. Downey. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Tom. Mayor Dahl?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I had the opportunity with you on Saturday to walk through the town park with the Making Peace exhibit, talking with Mr. Woods, and it's really quite the exhibit. I would recommend if you haven't had an opportunity to go out there, leave yourself about an hour and go through it. It's really quite impressive. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Thompson, Councillor Gardner?
Thank you. I don't know if the invitation was extended to just councillors, but there is tomorrow at 4:45 a guided tour of the exhibit, and then there's something from afterwards at the Cultural Centre.
6 o'clock.
6
There'll
o'clock.
be an opening
so
ceremony.
I'm assuming that the public is invited to come out to that, although I hear it's going to rain. But
Yes.
what can we do? We've had great weather. With respect to consulting on Library Square, I know that a couple of the boards were asked today to be able to come out and consult next Tuesday. And I think that's really not enough time. If the executive director is the one that's commenting, then she's the only one. But if it's the board that's supposed to try and make themselves available, and it's during the afternoon, I think that that's not enough time, and I think it's disrespectful to the board members, because I think they want to be able to comment on Library Square, so I'll just leave that with the CAO.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Maracas? New
Thank you,
business?
Mr. Chair. Yeah, I just have two of them. Through you to Mr. Ramuno. Mr. Ramuno, the expansion of St. John's is well on its way, and the completion date is supposed to be December. Just wondering if you have any updates as far as the timelines. Are they on time? Will it be done? Because there's some concerns with a lot of the traffic volume entering down into the residential streets to get to Leslie.
Mr. Bruno?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, St. John's is on, my understanding is it is on time. The projected completion is for both St. John's and Leslie are the end of 2018. The St. John road closure between William Graham and Leslie Street, that closure is in effect until the end of this year, December 2017. So it's still on time to reopen that portion to the general public in the new year of 2018.
Thank you.
Thank you for that update. And just one more, Mr. Chair, through you to Mr. Downey. Mr. Downey, I know that there was a lot of work done with the bingo at the senior center. I just wanted to maybe if you can clarify for all of us, because there was some misinformation out there that the town stopped the bingo at the senior center, and I know that they are playing again, which is great. So maybe if you can just give us an update of what happened and how it went about.
Mr. Downey?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I prefer if perhaps we provided a report through the solicitor with regards to the gambling at the senior center. We are taking some steps with regards to that, and they are also taking some steps with regards to ensuring that they are complying with all terms and conditions. But at this point, I think it's somewhat premature to make any comment until we've had a full opportunity to ensure that they are acting appropriately and in accordance with the provincial regulations.
Thank you, Mr. Downey. Councillor?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Downey, and I appreciate that, and I look forward to that update. And I know that the seniors are happy how things are progressing and moving forward, so thank you.
Seniors are always happy. Councillor Thompson, did you want to speak again?
If I may, just with regards to the consultation for Library Square, I would hope that, we've been talking about Library Square this entire term, and I would hope that all the stakeholders and the boards would be fully immersed in those conversations. Their concerns, their hopes, and everything would have been clearly discussed at their own board meetings and identified, but because I know we have reached out to them, and so I think that their positions have already been discussed, and I don't think they're going to say anything new to these consultants that they haven't said in the past. But through you to Mr. The Mayor, perhaps if he can just confirm, was not a letter recently sent to both the Library Board and the Cultural Center asking them to state clearly their concerns as well as perhaps some of the objectives they were hoping to achieve through Library Square?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The short answer is yes.
If you want to expand, it's fine. We can have this debate, but I don't think it's insensitive or insulting to give them an opportunity to consult when we've been talking about this for 3 years now, this term.
I don't want to get into my thoughts on this because it's not new business at the moment. It's more of a debate. I take both points, and I thank you both for your comments. Did you want to say something else, Councillor Gardner? Did you want to? Well, I don't want a response. No, thank you.
It wasn't. My point was that the invitation to come to see the consultant was given today for next Tuesday afternoon, and to me, a lot of people are working or have lives and have plans, and maybe would have liked to have gone in person to the consultant, but maybe they can't do it at such short notice. That was my comment.
Thank you. All right, Councillor Maracas, did you?
Councillor.
Are we going to?
It's up to you, Mr. Chair, if you want to allow me to. I mean, we'll probably end up debating this, but if you're okay with it, otherwise I'm okay with not speaking with it.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Okay, that's fine.
All right, so that concludes tonight's committee. We have no closed session, and so adjournment. I'll have a motion to adjourn, please. Councillor Tom, seconded Councillor Perry. All those in favor, opposed, that carries. We are now adjourned. Thank you, staff, residents, and council. You know what? This may be the last time I do it.